Hello students! In Unit 11.2, we are going to explore how intelligence is measured. However, before we discuss how intelligence is measured, let's first discuss the two types of testing for intelligence. There is aptitude testing and then there is achievement testing. Aptitude tests is a test designed to predict a person's future performance. Aptitude is the capacity to learn. So, for example, the ACT or SAT exam is a test that assesses for your aptitude to learn in college. So, the ACT, SAT, those are aptitude tests. The achievement test is a test designed to assess what a person has learned. So, the AP psychology exam would be an example of achievement test. Or the unit exam that we'll have next week over intelligence will be an achievement test on intelligence. So those are the two main types of tests that we'll be discussing in this unit. The first ever intelligence test, if that's what you want to call it, was created by a guy named Alfred Binet, right here, and his colleague Simone, using simple tasks to distinguish children who would do well in school from those who wouldn't. So it was really more of an aptitude test. And their task was to see which children would excel in higher levels of education and who would do well in what subjects. So it was really more of an academic type exam, not so much really an intelligence test. In this test, Binet and Simone used mental age to distinguish bright from dull children. What is mental age? Well, let's talk about that. Mental age is a measure of intelligence testing performance that's devised by Binet. It's in contrast with chronological age that most typically corresponds to a given level of performance on math skills or English skills, for example. Mental age is different than chronological age. Chronological age is just how old you are. So if you're 16 years of age, that's your chronological age. But what if you're 16 but have the intelligence or mental processing capacity of a 25-year-old? Or what if you score or have a reading level of a 30-year-old? Then your mental age would then correspond with that age. So if you're 15 but yet you're as smart as a 25-year-old, your mental age would be 25 even though your chronological age is 16. So a child who does well as the average 8-year-old is said to have a mental age of 8. If you're above average and you're 8 years old, then you might have a mental age of 12 or 13, but the average 8-year-old has a mental age of 8. The test that Binet and Simone designed was later modified by Stanford psychology professor Lewis Terman, and later called the Stanford-Binet test as a result. It was published as the Stanford-Binet test. The test was developed to identify children who had serious intellectual difficulties, such that they would not succeed in the public school system and who should not be placed in the same classes with other students. So this test measured things that were necessary for school success, such as understanding and using language, computational skills, memory, and the ability to follow instructions. The entire test lasts somewhat more than an hour. Unlike other IQ tests, there is no imposed time limit for the current Stanford-Binet exam. The IQ that is determined at one age will mean the same thing at different ages. The mean IQ, or the average IQ, at each age is about 100. So according to Lewis Terman, your IQ is equal to your mental age divided by your chronological age multiplied by 100. Okay, so if your mental age and chronological age are average, which means they're the same, so if you're 8 years old, your mental age is 8, times that by 100, or 8 over 8 is 1, times 100, your average IQ is 100. So that's how you get the score. So to recap, the Stanford-Binet IQ test is a measurement necessary that tests your aptitude for school success. It tests understanding and use of language. It tests your memory, your ability to follow instructions, and computational skills, like language comprehension. Binet's test is a set of age-graded items. Binet assumed that children's abilities increase with age. These items measure the person's mental level or mental age. So, for example, the kid who's 8 years old but has a mental age of 15 is going to outperform and probably be put in more specialized classes than his classmate who's 8 years old and has a mental age of 8. All right. So adaptive testing. Adaptive testing determines the age level of the most advanced items that a child could consistently answer correctly. Children whose mental age equaled their actual or chronological age were considered to be of regular intelligence, whereas those who exceeded the average were considered gifted. At any age, children who are average will have an IQ of 100, as we've discussed, because of their mental age equals their chronological age. Roughly two-thirds of children will have an IQ score between 85 and 115, which is around the average. Approximately 95% will have scores between 70 and 130. Picture the bell curve in your head. Does this fall in line with the bell curve? So standardization is required in these exams. Standardization is defining meaningful scores by comparison with the performance of a pre-tested standardized group. For example, that's why we have a control group in an experiment. You want the control group to be the standard on which you base the results from your experimental group. So you want to have a standard score or an average score, and from that average you can assess who's above average and who's below average based on their quantitative score. The normal distribution curve, or the bell curve, is as we've discussed in research methods, helps illustrate standardization and helps really illustrates to us where students fall and compare with each other in terms of intelligence. So to recap, this is the normal distribution curve. Don't forget, you need to memorize the percentages with the standard deviation. Remember, this is 1 standard deviation, this is 2 standard deviation, this is 3 standard deviation. You need to memorize these standard deviations and memorize the percentages that are associated with them. So for example, if you'll notice, a score of 85 to 115, that's 68% of the population, and then a score from 70 to 130 is 96% of the population, as we just discussed. You need to understand, or you need to be able to read a sentence or two about statistics and be able to think about the bell curve and apply it to the bell curve in your head. You never know when the AP exam will ask you to draw a graph, like they did last year. The intelligence quotient. This summary is used to indicate a child's intelligence relative to others of the same age. IQ tests measure an individual's probable performance in school and similar settings. An IQ test measures performance, but an IQ test does not explain performance. Why is a child intelligent? So that's a bigger question. Or why is this child more intelligent than that child? That's an even bigger question. And then, how do we make children more intelligent? Is it nurture? Is it nature? What is it? That's probably the biggest question. Now, while the Stanford-Binet was the first IQ test, as with everything that's first, it's usually the worst. And so a newer, more widely used and more popular intelligence test was developed and is used today. It's called the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WICE. And it's the most widely used intelligence test. The subtests of the Wechsler are verbal and performance. So it's not just math or English skills like the Stanford-Binet. Okay, according to David Wechsler, the creator of this test, intelligence is the global capacity to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with one's environment. So he takes verbal and performance skills into consideration. Over the years, the Wechsler has been revised and has been updated to match what's called the Flynn effect, and we'll talk about that later. And then we also have Wechsler exams for children as well. The verbal components of the Wechsler is based on six components: information, similarities, arithmetic, vocabulary, comprehension, and digit span. So pause the video for a few moments, read the definitions of all six, and write down the examples so you have a good idea of what's included on this exam. Other information examples, or types of questions that would be asked, are how many wings does a bird have? What is steam made of? Other examples of similarities are: in what way are a lion and a tiger alike? In what way are a saw and a hammer alike? Other types of comprehension questions would be like this: what should you do if you see someone forget his book when he leaves a restaurant? What is the advantage of keeping money in a bank? So those are the type of open-ended questions that are asked on the verbal IQ score. It's not don't When you see verbal, don't think like grammar, English, that kind of thing. It's more comprehension. The next portion, the next half of the test, is the performance piece, where there are 6 components. Coding, picture completion, picture arrangement are 3 of those components. Coding is copying marks from a code. It's a visual route learning. And then picture completion is telling what's missing in a various picture. Okay, so have you ever seen those the cartoons where they have 2 images and the images are identical, but one image on the left is missing some of the things that is included on the right? That's an example of picture completion. And there's picture arrangement, where you have to arrange these pictures in order so that they tell a story. The other components of the performance portion of the Wechsler are block design, where you have to arrange multicolored blocks to match printed designs. And then is object assembly. It's putting puzzles together, measuring nonverbal fluid reasoning. So if you look at all the different pieces, you should be able to put them together to make one solid image of an elephant. Well, if that's how we test for the intelligence of adolescents and adults, then how do we test for the intelligence of children? Don't they have a different degree of intelligence due to their lack of experience and their continued neurological development? Well, that's very true, and that's why the Stanford-Binet and the Wechsler cannot be used to assess infant intelligence. There's another intelligence test that was created specifically for children to take into consideration all those things I had previously mentioned. It's called the Bailey Scales of Infant Development, and they are often used for infant assessments of intelligence, as pictured here. Well, that concludes our Unit 11.2 on assessments, assessing for intelligence. We'll see you guys next time.